And okay, good evening. Good evening and welcome to our session. Thank you for sharing your part of your Thursday evening with us. On behalf of Illinois Council for Exceptional Children, I welcome you to the 8th in a series of 12 presentations in honor of the 100th anniversary of the Council for Exceptional Children. We thank ICEC for hosting this series. As president of ICEC, I have the privilege of developing the president's special project. I chose to organize this series in honor of Elizabeth Farrell, first president of CEC, August 10, 1922. Tonight, we honor Ms. Farrell in a special way. Her work with students at Columbia University in New York City laid a solid foundation for the professional development of special education as a unique specialization. For this, we are deeply grateful to her and to all the professors in our lives. We are fortunate to have Dr. John Lloyd with us to discuss 73 requirements for success in graduate school. Dr. John Lloyd received his Ph.D. from the University of Oregon in Eugene. He is Professor Emeritus, University of Virginia, School of Education and Human Development in Charlottesville, Virginia. Dr. Lloyd specializes in understanding and intervening to support students with learning and behavior problems, reading instruction, and research methods. His studies of the characteristics of children with learning and behavior problems and of procedures for addressing those problems have appeared in dozens of education, special education, and behavioral education, behavioral psychology journals. In addition, Dr. Lloyd has written chapters for edited volumes and books for use by teachers. In aggregate, he has authored, co-authored, edited, or co-edited more than 150 publications. Dr. Lloyd directed and co-directed funded projects on learning disabilities, emotional and behavior disorders, and reading. Beyond the traditional forms of scholarship, Dr. Lloyd has also created electronic resources about special education policy, practice, and issues in the field. Please see the ICEC website for more details. Thank you again for so generously sharing this evening with us, and we welcome you, Dr. John Lloyd. And Dr. Lloyd will take questions after his presentation. So now over to you.
Well, thank you, Paula, for the lovely introduction. It's very kind of you to recite all of those misleading descriptions about me. You forgot that I'm an old man who's losing most of his hair and also probably a little overweight. But I appreciate the recollection of the works that I've done. That's very nice. And it's an honor to be a part of this meeting with the Council for Exceptional Children and my longtime pals, Paula and Bev, my new pal, Cody, whom I've met recently, and anyone else who's listening in. I look forward to being able to provide a pretty light look at some topics related to, as the title says, graduate school. But this is not a presentation that would require anyone to take notes. There will not be a lot of references cited. I'll throw in a few as we go, but there will be very little math required. We may do a little bit of division early on, or fractions early on, but I shall not read the slides to you, and I shall not conduct a quiz at the end. So take it easy, sit back, relax, and try to keep your eyes open, at least while your camera's on. Oh, and by the way, Paula pointed out that there's snow on the ground in northern Illinois area. Well, it was a little overcast and rainy here in central Virginia today, but it's pretty pleasant weather for us. and we're looking forward to spring. I should have slipped a few photos of the daffodil blooms into the slides, but I could be just as well doing what I usually do, which is spending almost the whole day in my gym clothes, putting them on in the morning, getting a cup of coffee, reading the news and the email, and yeah, stuff like that. And then going out for a walk, exercise walk, and then coming home and on and on. So it's unusual for me to have on a shirt, let alone a shirt with a collar, especially a shirt with a collar. But I hope that the absence of a necktie makes clear to you that this is not a real formal presentation, and that it'll be lighter rather than serious. But let me switch now. It's going to take me a moment to switch to my slides. And I believe you're going to see me morph into a photo of a kitten, a cat, in a basket. Let's see. Here we go. Alrighty. Can I make it? Slide. Ha! I hope you all are seeing the title now. Paula, can you see it okay?
No, we're not seeing the slides yet.
I see the small thing. Yeah, I see the picture.
Okay. Let me go back here to Zoom. What did I do wrong? Share screen. Start broadcast. Okay. I skipped a step. Sorry.
Excellent.
You know, this is what happens when you retire, and then the world has a meltdown, and everybody starts using these Zoom devices.
You're doing great.
Okay, and what are y'all seeing now?
Beautiful cover, 73
Okay,
requirements.
So you're seeing the opening
Rainbow.
slide. What's the title? 73 requirements.
Yes, we are in a rainbow form.
Yes, and that rainbow flag is a tip of the hat to the many people in our midst, our neighborhoods, our schools, who have been ill-treated for a long time by many of their fellow citizens. And I'm speaking obviously about people who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, questioning, etc. You know, we've got to pay attention, because those folks are a bellwether for what's a lot of important things that are going on in our environment. And some of them may be individuals with disabilities. So imagine that intersectionality right there. But anyway, so it's a tip of the hat there. But let's go ahead with the slides. You might be wondering why I'm talking about 73 reasons, and I've only got about 45 minutes. Maybe I don't have that long left anymore. I don't have a long time to talk about 73 reasons. And if I try to do the arithmetic, I promised you there'd only be a little bit of arithmetic. But if I try to do that arithmetic, I think that comes out to being something on the order of about 40, 45 seconds per slide, if there's 73 slides for the 73 reasons. But there aren't. It's a lot. I'm going to go a lot faster than that. But I want to stop here for just a moment too and talk very briefly about the peace symbol that you see on the slide, which, as you probably recognize, is in the colors that are associated with the Ukraine. And I hope that those folks can find peace. But I raise a political flag here to point to Mr. Zelensky. I believe that he, much like many people in the history of the United States, is doing an important service for not just his people, not just our people, but for a lot of people. He's standing up for democracy. We have historical examples of that in the US. The Marquis de Lafayette, at 19 years of age, left France and came to work with General Washington, helping with the American Revolution. In South America, there's Bolivar. In England, Churchill. In Africa, Mandela. People who stood up for America and who bear an important witness for us, for all of us in the world who are interested in democracy, as am I. I take this information, by the way, from a marvelous podcast by two eminent historians, Joanne Freeman and Heather Cox Richardson. And you can find a lot about them if you just search the internet. They have a podcast called Now and Then. And just recently, they made this point that I'm just making. So I'm copying it from them. Okay, so now I've given you a reference. We've done some math, and you may already be focusing on the insides of your eyelids. But let's go in countdown style, a la David Letterman, and pick up the pace here. But one of the first recommendations that I want to make for you is very self-serving, obviously, because I resemble the people about whom I'm speaking here, we elderly professors. And we elderly professors talk a lot about history. If you haven't figured that out already, it's good that you watch this slide and remember that, you kind of got to humor us. You got to take it easy on us and not just roll your eyes and say, there he goes again. But it's very important in grad school. And you've heard from several of these people here. You heard already from Mike Gerber in the top left, Marilyn Friend, who hope is recovering appropriately from an auto accident. I think you're going to hear from Paul Morgan. I don't think he's done his talk yet. And then you got the guy on the top right there. And I'm sorry I didn't squish that photo down a little bit more so that you could see the flat top haircut on Professor James M. Kaufman when he was in high school. That's Jimmy Decay right there, naturally tied up and everything. You don't have to believe what any of us say. And in fact, I'll comment about that more as we go here. But it is because of Elizabeth Farrell that we have these marvelous people and others, Bev and others on the speaking list here. And all of them share in common, I think, although the language wasn't this way when Farrell was young, share an interest in securing a free and appropriate public education for children and youth with disabilities. And so I think it's been a long time, 100 years, that we've been working on this, at least as Paula pointed out 100 years ago. That was when Farrell established the Council for Exceptional Children. And that's very important because we've got to advocate for our kids. And these people whom you saw on the previous slide have been advocating for these kids. Now, unfortunately, there's some real unpleasant treatment of some of the concepts with regard to special education. LD gets called lazy and dumb, interpersonally demented. These are not appropriate ways to look at kids with disabilities. And so I submit to you that it's important for us to put our kids, our students, in the center of what we're doing. They are the reason for what we're doing. They should be the beneficiaries of what we do, et cetera. Now, I asked the question on the screen about which one of these four kids it might have a disability. And the answer is, I don't know, because these kids, of course, were models that were in a photo shoot sometime. But we don't want to hear any demeaning comments about anybody with disabilities from other people. We don't want to hear comments about the short bus or the lazy and dumb and so forth. Instead, we've got to remember that our kids not only are kids, but they're kids who come with families. And those people don't want to hear their children demeaned, their siblings demeaned. So this is good reason for why we need to put the kids at the center and work with all the people who are involved with those kids, their teachers, their parents, their siblings. And it's also, by the way, a good reason, as Bev may well have pointed out, that parents have 50% of the say in the creation of IEPs, selection of goals, and the identification of instructional procedures and practices. And that should not be a one-way communication where we tell the parents, we special educators, we tell the parents what's usually there. We need to learn from what they know. They often have very, very good things to offer. So as you go through graduate school, it's probably important for you to remember to focus on kids and their families. In addition, it's probably pretty important for you to focus on finances. And this is not going to be any heavy math here. It's got a little visual component too. The Y's are for yen, the L's with a line through them, and it's for pound. And you're probably familiar with the euro, and of course with the S with the vertical lines. Finances, as it turns out, are very important. They influence what we can and cannot do. In the USA, the Congress originally said that the excessive costs to be incurred for providing special education services for children with disabilities would be covered. Up to 40% of the those additional costs would be covered by the federal government. Guess what? It's never happened. Not since 1976, not 1980s, not the 1990s, not since then. It hasn't happened. You follow the money, you find out that we are not taking care of our kids. So this is a place for advocacy on our part as well as special educators. It's an opportunity for us to get into the local area and say, hey, we need to push for that 40%. We need to find the funds to pay teachers adequate salaries. So we don't have special education as an unfunded or an underfunded mandate. We need to solicit help with our securing financial sources. And we need to remember that this is part of helping our kids as well. Now, in addition to learning about these kind of mundane things like funds and so forth, we have to know how to talk with each other. And unfortunately, I guess these characters are supposed to look like Bill Watterson characters from Calvin and Hobbes. Oh, look, I made another citation. But they came from a different source, as you can see by the caption at the bottom. But we need to do something rather than behaving like Calvin and his neighbor. We need to listen to each other a little more politely and treat the other person with respect. This is what I would say is a good special ed way of talking about things. That is, we listen and pay attention and honor the other people who are engaged. Oh, by the way, did you notice that we're already on reason 54? We started out in 73 and we're now on 54. So we're making progress quickly here. Let's keep rolling. We really need to sustain an intellectually respectful community. And so I want to recommend that you learn how to listen respectfully to other people's views regarding special education. Now, that doesn't mean you can't push back. It's just you know how to push back politely. And by the way, there's ways of communicating in written content as well. So for example, I'd recommend that you learn the APA, the American Psychological Association's way of writing using the publication manual. And publication manual isn't only about commas and things of that sort. It's got content about non-gendered language, about appropriate representations of others' thinking and contributions, etc. So I recommend that you just read it, sort of read like you do in a novel. You take it to the beach and just kind of read it, not like you have to memorize everything, because it's an open book. You can always open it up when you're writing and find the stuff that you need to know. But I recommend that you go through that as well. Okay, so in addition to learning how to discuss things respectfully, we ought to know that we're going to wind up having to talk with people from many other places, por supuesto. So we need to think about special education as an international endeavor. Disability doesn't stop at our borders. There's a group that's part of the Council for Exceptional Children. This subgroup is much newer than than the founding mothers group. It's called Division for International Special Education Services. I think Bev is a prominent actor in that organization, and thank you, Bev, for that. This is a really important thing because, again, disability doesn't stop at borders. There's kids with autism all over the world. There's Down syndrome kids on every continent. So it's not just our neighbors to the north and south. And it's important, back to the respectful listening, it's important to recognize that folks in Australia or Canada or Chile, they're finding stuff out about handling kids with disabilities. And they can help us as much as we can help them if we can listen to them with respect and not look down our noses at them. So those kids and their teachers and their families would be very valuable contributors to our Commonwealth. Now, this is sort of jumping around, I know, but look, we're already down to 30. We've gone through the first 43 reasons already. There's a lot of smack talked about. That's a technical term, by the way, smack. There's a lot of disdain heaped upon labeling. It's popular, I think, in some quarters to say that labels are the source of self-fulfilling prophecies, that they are unnecessary, etc. I want to just remind you, on the basis of just sheer, plain, simple understanding, that we really actually need labels. We have to determine who is going to get special services and who is going to not get special education services. It would be silly for us to think that, even if we were fully funded, to think that we special educators could teach everybody. Now, let me be clear. I happen to think that what we do in special education is superior education. And so it would probably be beneficial for a bunch of those children over there in the not special ed groups. But it would be just kind of silly for us to think that we can do it for everybody, because it's individualization in instruction, there's specialized instruction. These are terms that come directly out of the law. So we've got to do the research that's necessary to help those kids in special education. We can't just say, oh, we'll take a random sample of kids and give them special education, because we might wind up with only 1 in 10 or 1 in 20 kids who really need the special ed services. So the labeling that gets the child in the door. It doesn't say what kind of education a child needs. She doesn't have to have an LD IEP. She just has to have an IEP, an individual program, not some categorical program. The categorical labels get this child into the eligibility, get the student able to receive special education. Then we develop IEPs for individualization. And again, we need to do the research that helps the kids who need special education. So to do that, I think we have to take a quick look at some of the controversies that adhere to educational research. It's common, it was at least back when I was a professor, for me to hear a student say something like, oh, well, I'm a qualitative researcher. Or, oh, I'm a quantitative researcher. Or I'm a single subject researcher. I don't think those advance us very far. The reason is that the choice of method, qualitative, quantitative, what have you, should be predicated on the research question itself. So if you want to know what somebody thinks about something, or what some people say about something, that sounds a little bit like a survey. And that's a form of qualitative research, even though sometimes people will do it with large numbers and conduct statistical analyses. It's not necessarily one method is stronger than another method. People may tell you it's stronger. They may say they prefer method A over method B, but that doesn't mean that the that method A has better outcomes than method B. That second thing is the question about whether method A has better reading. Students who get method A have better reading outcomes than students who get method B. That's a quantitative question. So when one states one's research question, that's the place that drives the decision about the methods. And what really matters is that we need to use methods that answer the questions thoroughly, carefully, and in a way that we can trust. You hear people say, "Oh, you could prove anything you want with research." I don't think so. I think people might, I'm going to use a pejorative word here, people might cheat and go get the research that proves a point they've already got. But that's not doing research. That's not the honest way to do research. The honest way is to say, I want to know what's happening, what the world is doing. I want to consult the nature of the beast, if you will. That is, I want to find out something that I can trust. And so to do that, we have to ask good questions and then conduct the research using good, strong methods. So we might get some questions that look like, is B greater than A, or is A greater than B? And we might find out that there's D lurking out there that's actually better than both A and B. And if that's what we find out, well, we jolly well ought to report that so that other people can learn that D has better outcomes. And I submit to you that our job as educators is to do the things that have the best outcomes, that have the best chance of helping our students become self-learners, the best chance of helping our students become competent readers, competent computers, competent writers, best chance of having our students understand the concepts and operations involved in chemistry, or whatever the outcomes are. But that's what we need to find out. And to do that, we've got to be empiricists. We've got to be able to figure out what kinds of things make a difference for our kids. So we've got to go for the scientific stuff pretty extensively here. And that's really important in my view, because, our kids, they don't have a lot of extra time. Our kids generally start out behind. They may have deficits that have to do with language. They may have deficits that have to do with social behavior and interactions, which put them at odds with working in a small group. But our kids start out behind. And if they have those deficits, then we need to figure out how to address the deficits and the instruction that we provide. Now, I'm not saying, and for those of you who are interested in disability studies, I'm not saying we're trying to make somebody right. We're trying to correct the child. What we're trying to do is figure out how this child can be taught effectively so that she has maximum opportunities to succeed in her later life, so that we're not doing more harm to the child, the student, because we're using inadequate methods. They start out behind. We have to teach them faster than normal. Otherwise, they're just going to get behinder and behinder. We have to teach them faster than normal. That means we have to zap the fluff. We have to get rid of any unessential instruction. And there's still plenty of times to say, hey, man, look, there's a snake out the window. Look at the way it's moving. And, you might they take them all to the window and look at the snake going through the schoolyard. And so that's a disruption to your reading lesson, but it's only a couple of minutes really here. What we need to do is design instruction that is very, very carefully conceived and developed so that it has maximum chances for our kids to catch up. We're not going to catch up if we just kind of you do the same old normal stuff. Okay. And one of the ways you can do that, one of the ways you can help yourself to design that kind of instruction is to read journals. journals, books, and other things. And I'm partial, of course, to the journal Exceptional Children because I'm a co-editor for it with my colleague Bill Therian. And it's we think it's a pretty good journal. Journal of Special Education, Remedial and Special Education, rather, RASE, Remedial and Special Education, and EC, the top rated journals in our field. And RAISE publishes 6 times a year, EC publishes 4 times a year. Bill and I publish about 6 articles every issue. So that's 24 articles a year. And they're dense. Sometimes they're a little bit challenging to read for some folks, but they are pretty important sources of comparisons about different methods of instruction or about ways of arranging and teaching schools, and about the effects of other factors with disability. So just imagine, though, that you had a choice between going to a doctor or driving across a bridge that was built by an engineer who didn't keep up with research. Now, they might get their research delivered to them in a different way than to the journals, but the journals are the original source for that kind of stuff. It's the experiments that the engineers conduct, the experiments that the medical researchers conduct that allow the development and improvement of the practices and services that are delivered for individuals who are sick or individuals who want to travel. And there's lots of other examples as well. But you would want your family to be able to use bridges that were designed appropriately. At least I think you would, even if you're really upset with your family sometimes. Yeah, you don't want them to get driving across a bridge and have it fall down. Well, we need to assess our special education scholars' recommendations and suggestions and evaluate those in a systematic and thorough way. That's doing research. Now, there's very systematic and thorough qualitative research. There's very systematic and thorough and careful quantitative research. There's also similar descriptors for single subject research. And by the way, Exceptional Children this coming year, 2023, will be publishing a new series of articles about developments in the last 20 years in regard to research methods. So those reading journals, I think, is a pretty important thing. And when you read journals, one of the things you can do is you can learn about instruction. And instruction is meritorious in its own right. You know, instruction is not just something that's tossed off, or shouldn't be, but very often is. It's not seat of the pants, fly-by-night stuff. In fact, as the book on the left in the illustration shows, there's really is a theory of instruction. And Siegfried Engelmann, the gentleman on the right, the late Siggy Engelmann, and his colleague Doug Carnine, and I started to put a picture of Doug in too, but Doug still looks boyish, even though he's 70-something. He still looks like the kid next door. Wonderful scholars, these two. And this is a really thick and dense and demanding book, but it shows you how to think about what you've got to teach if you're going to teach a concept, what you're going to teach if you have to teach an algorithm, a solution system, what you need to teach if you've got to teach kids to translate one set of concepts into another, let's say fractions into decimals or vice versa. How do you line up instruction, and how do you do it efficiently? Because efficiency is pretty important in instruction. Scaffolding, well, yeah. How do you know how to start with easier tasks so that the later tasks will become easier, and how you can gradually remove the scaffolding so that the students can do the performance on their own. They don't have to have somebody sitting over them or coaching them through every step every time. So, and there's some sophisticated things about that. which is too big a topic to go into. I mean, it's a whole semester's worth of course, at least, if not a couple of semesters of instruction. But instruction is really important. The essence of special education is individualized instruction. And we need to make our teaching clear, clean, unambiguous, so that kids can get it, so that they don't get mistaken learning, so that we don't induce by our teaching unsustainable behaviors on the part of students. And there's plenty of evidence about effective instruction. Excuse me, Carnine did bundles of studies about, let's just say, letters, the order in which letters could be introduced, and how to introduce them so that similar sounding letters and similar looking letters don't get confused by kids. And it's not just one study, that's probably 3 or 4 different studies. So we must test the teaching with our students, because remember, our students are special, and we need to make sure that the instruction works with them. So the big thing is to use the research to design effective instruction, and then to monitor kids' progress so that we can tell if the instruction is working for them. If it isn't working, what do? Get it out of there and get something better in its place, but monitor so that we can keep our eyes on it. And we do that in part because we want to have a healthy dose of skepticism. We don't want to say, I wouldn't have seen it if I didn't believe it. We don't want to have confirmatory biases. And there's a whole string of these biases that are very common. Confirmatory bias, confirming the consequent, logical errors that people make when they talk about a lot of this stuff. But instead, we need to say, now, wait a minute, I just want to doubt what I'm thinking here. I want to make sure that I'm not deluding myself when I say kids do this for this reason. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. And I know how to find out. And for those of you who are in doctoral programs in education, this is key, really key. You need to learn how to find out. You need to learn how to be a self-teacher so that you can go out and communicate to others, say, aspiring teachers. You can communicate as a professor to these other students what we know and what we don't know. And that is what we call literature reviews. And what if we don't know something, how to find out, how to use that as a research question. So, back a while ago, I was talking about qualitative and quantitative research. One of my recommendations for any of you who are in advanced graduate programs is take as much research methods courses as you can get. Because lo and behold, 5 years after you're finished with your degree, there's going to be new research methods coming along that are more sophisticated. And you're either going to have to go back to school or you're going to have to know how to figure them out. So you might as well get as good a basis as you can get from the research courses available in your advanced graduate programs and your doctoral programs. So anyway, I just want everybody to think about doubt and how important it is to say, I think I better check this out. I better use some independent means of verification. And that doesn't mean going to look for the evidence that supports my view. It means finding all the evidence and looking at that, looking at those studies. That's meta-analysis for those of you who recognize where I'm going with that. Because that skepticism is really valuable. I had thought about putting a Descartes, the philosopher Descartes quote on here about doubt, but I didn't find it. But it's something like, so this is just a loose paraphrase. It's something like Descartes says, doubt is, I can't remember it. I'm going to have to pass on that. So one fewer citation for you, just erase it. But look up Descartes and doubt. Okay, so now, hey, look, we're on number 2. So I should, like, doesn't Letterman tap his teeth with a pencil? I should do something to indicate that da 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 da, drum roll, blah blah blah, da da da. Number one thing I think one needs to remember as a graduate student, we want learners' outcomes to be our primary focus. The kid's in the center, and it's her outcomes that we want to enhance. So, sure, we can worry about the methods of research, and I do. And we can worry about teachers' working conditions, and I do. And people like Elizabeth Keeney and her colleagues are doing exemplary work in that area. And we can worry about administrative arrangements like MTSS or RTI or what have you. We can worry about kids' poverty and ethnicity, over and under identification. There's so many topics about which we could have conversations. But all of this really come down to wanting to improve the outcomes for children with disabilities. So we have to give a damn about kids' outcomes, about their successes, about helping them to achieve, to become capable of learning stuff on their own, being able to read well, for example. Maybe reading isn't the outcome for everybody. Not everybody needs to learn Braille, but Braille is not a bad thing to teach. Honest, ask Stevie Wonder. Stevie Wonder went to school in a place up in the Detroit area where he learned Braille. The school has been discontinued in much more recent times. But we need to keep that goal as a central focus. This is my main argument for tonight. We want to know whether outcomes are, regardless of whether they're academic, social behavioral, transition, employment, we want to make sure that our kids can have maximum outcomes, that we can enhance their chance of getting something worthwhile out of life. And I think this is consistent with Elizabeth Farrell's work when she founded the beginnings of the forerunner of CEC. We special educators need to do what we can to cause better outcomes for our kids. So, with that, I'm going to jump back over here to the video part of the evening. And let's see if I can do this correctly. Stop the share. And I can be available to talk about questions, to take questions. Paula, thank you.
Good. Thank you, John. That was very, very interesting. I was wondering how you would approach this rather ambitious title you chose.
That's a little frivolous, isn't it, in a way?
Yeah.
But my hope was that it would give people some things to think about and to consider for their own self-reflection regarding graduate school. Now, Bev and you, Paula, and Cody, you're in it now. Y'all have probably some other sort of general recommendations, and this is not all of my recommendations, by the way. Paula will remember some of the others, but I hope that it helps people to get a little traction in thinking about what they're doing and why they're doing it, where they're going with it.
Dr. Lloyd, I just wanted to kind of reiterate and thank you for mentioning just the fact that research practices and methods are constantly changing. And just like our school curriculum or our other practices that we do are constantly changing. And so that's why we do professional development. And it's funny that you mention it, because it took me a sec to do some reflection when I transitioned from my master's to my doctoral program. I'm sorry if you're hearing noises. I have a French bulldog and she's snorting. It's not me. I just want to confirm it is not me snorting. But when I finished my master's and went into my doctoral program, one of my first classes was going to be a research-based like methods class. And I thought to myself, well, gosh darn it, I just did it, just a few years ago for my master's, and I really don't want to take this again. And I was really kind of upset about it. Like, should I take another course that would be more beneficial for me? And little did I know that it was one of the most beneficial classes that I could have taken. And that's just because things have changed so much. And as you slowly start to learn and implement those things, until you start studying and practicing those methods, you can't even apply what you've previously learned. And so thank you for mentioning that. And I think that's a huge key part of grad school and just professional development in general as a professional.
Well, you're welcome. And what you say warms the cold cockles of my behavioristic heart.
Mhm.
There's a lot to be said for what you're saying there. And Cody, I won't go into long detail on this, but the University of Virginia has had some eminent research methods people, not just in education, but in psychology in particular. They have a very good, what they call quant program over there. And there was one of those sort of like top 5 in the world people who left Penn State and came here. His name's John Nesselrode. And he's retired now. But when I heard that Nesselrode was coming to the psych department, I said, I'm taking his class. I don't care. I'm sure I'm a full professor, but that doesn't matter because I could learn from that man. And Jack McCardle, I don't know if you ever took a class, Paula, from Jack McCardle, but Jack's another one. So we had Nesselrode and McCardle both here. And when my friend Judy Singer, who's at Harvard, and Bev and Paula probably know Judy Singer, and you might want to get to know her, Cody. Judy, when Judy came to visit to do guest lectures for Jim Kaufman and me, she, like a beeline, she had already talked, because she's another one of those like top 5 people. She had already talked with Nesselrode and was going to go see Jack. So it's, I had to learn some more stuff. But when I finished my quant courses in college, in graduate school, people were really excited that they could get like 4 variables into a regression equation without it all going loopy. Now they're running regression equations with so many variables, it's hard to fathom where they can find enough people to have like 40 subjects per variable. So it's fascinating how it's changed, and it's a challenge to keep up with. But I think it's a worthwhile effort.
Excellent. And it all boils down to outcomes and meaningful learning and meaningful teaching, in clinical environments. That's what it's all about. It has to be connected with something just so foundational. So it was refreshing to hear you speak of how it's all very much rooted in enhancing the education, the individualized learning of the children that we care about. So.
Yeah, I agree. Bev, I think you had a question about.
Did put a question in the chat, because we're talking about research methods. And of course, throughout our careers, we have seen so many people jump on these bandwagons that are quick fixes. They got a catchy title, and we all know what they are, but they've got a catchy title, but there is not the research to back them up. Yet the poor children may get those methods for 2, 3, 4 years, and may be harmed from them. So the frustration is, how do we keep that from continuing to happen?
Bev, it's such an important problem, and I'm glad you raised it, because I should have incorporated that into the slides more clearly. it's part of it, I think, is that skepticism that I hope everybody sort of sustains, a doubt. And, I try to direct doubt at my own thinking a lot, but once you get accustomed to the confirmatory bias or those sorts of things, once you understand a reasonable amount about quote cognitive unquote psychology, you realize that people can mislead themselves. And you're right, catchy title, just enough grains of truth, just enough to make it sound pretty good, but not so much that it's really been tested and is sensibly evaluated. Oh no, we don't want to do that because it's a framework. It's not really a method.
Right.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going through that right now in the state of Illinois on the assessment
Right.
issue because
Again?
yes, I mean, it's just never ending. So we've gone through, I don't know how many statewide assessment systems in the state of Illinois. Now there is a new one being proposed. And so some of us are saying, well, where is the research? Where is the data that says that going from 1 time a year of standardized assessment to 3 times a year of standardized assessment is better? And we haven't gotten an answer to that. They can't answer that question. So why would we throw out what we have to replace it with something that we don't know enough information about?
Yeah. Oh, but it's new.
It's new. Exactly. It's new. Yeah.
Yeah. Save me. Yeah. And new is really ingenuous argument, I think. I remember one time when Tim Landrum and I proposed a CEC talk that was based right straight on a study that he and David Bateman and Dan Hallahan and I had done, comparing different ways of doing self-monitoring. We wanted to compare self-monitoring of attention to self-monitoring of accuracy. So the children were taught 2 different ways, and we could see on the graphs how they came out. We said, here it is, CEC. And CEC said, oh, everybody knows this already. Well, no, we wouldn't have done the study if everybody knew it.
Right.
And the study was published in probably the premier behavioral journal that year. Oh well. So, but it was not new. It's not new. Sad.
Bev, I appreciate you kind of bringing that up with the assessments and quick fixes and not having enough research to back it up. And I even want to pull in at the university level, such as becoming a teacher and getting your teaching credentials. I had to do EdTPA. There are several of my colleagues and mentors who did not have to complete the EdTPA. And you have all these amazing educators such as yourselves who are mentoring me and helping me grow. And yet you did not have to do EdTPA, but you are the gurus of education. So how are we going to monitor and say that teachers are going to be better now because of EdTPA? And yet there's not really any data to back that up. On top of, what you just said, Dr. Lloyd and Bev, is, everyone learns different. And so that's going to take so many different practices and teaching personalities to target every student. So how is one rigorous EdTPA to monitor one lesson that is recorded going to monitor that we are going to be the best teachers that we can be possibly? So I'm sorry if I have offended anyone watching this video or anyone who is on the Zoom call right now. I'm not wanting to speak poorly about EdTPA, but to me, it just seems like, we don't have enough research to say that that's what's going to make strong teacher candidates.
Right. And remember, we also had the basic skills test. And the basic skills test was that anybody had to take the test before